rewarded. So they can
Unacceptable behaviour.
That's right. And not only acceptable but expected.
I guess that sort of comes into the whole part of, well, it's accepted, so your behaviour, no matter how erratic it is, we need you to be completely and utterly engulfed in what we're giving you so that you feel accepted and part of the group.
Yeah. Actually, bringing that sort of thing up, there was I don't know if you remember, I think it was 2018 here in Perth, we had a young man kill his mother and his sibling. He was at home, obviously, he killed them. He apparently snapped out of it. He saw a lot of blood. He freaked out. He ran to the nearest service station and actually told the guy at the service station that someone had gone in and murdered his mother and his sibling. It wasn't until later that he found out, so the young man found out he'd done it. He was completely switched out. And when he started babbling, so when he that sort of came to his attention, he started babbling about people in dark robes in the bushes near where he lived, and then he started saying, "Mama made me do it, Mama made me do it." Now, Mama is a word, one of the entities used in cults quite often. So when we heard that, because we do investigation of cult stuff, when we heard that, we knew this kid was actually, he was engaged. He was devastated. He literally had what we call switched out. So he would have been used by the cult to do that ritual murder. For some reason, they needed that in the area.
Wow. So if we relate a lot of the cult sort of, and the largest cult obviously is the Third Reich with Hitler.
Yeah.
The largest cult, the largest gang, the largest following ever, I think, in history.
Probably because a lot of the stuff in this is easy to check out if you want to. Hitler was experimenting. Excuse me. He was experimenting with the Jews in the concentration camps. The idea Hitler had was he actually wanted to be the Antichrist, and he quite often said that. He was very much a spiritual guy. He followed some very odd occultic followings. He was trying to take out the soul of a man. So in his experiments, this is what he was aiming for: take out the soul of a man and actually replace it with a demonic entity, so he would have what he was calling a super soldier on his hands.
So if we look at some of these movies that are coming out, and we think about the super soldier and how a lot of it relates back to the Third Reich, and how, again, when you say ripping out the soul, I think you're looking at Captain America, where they tried to exchange things.
Yes, it's certainly becoming obvious in the movies. They're not trying to hide that sort of stuff anymore, and that is because they've completely and utterly succeeded in it. And they have found a way to do that now.
But made it into an animation or into a fixation of other people in a different way, but they don't realise where that's actually originated from.
Yeah, it makes it acceptable. Because the more we are seeped in it, the more we're desensitised to it, and the more it's normal. So that's happening on a very large scale now. So yes, it started coming out in movies and that sort of thing. Then you have a lot of people coming out, movies like Split, showing that there's alternate personalities and all that sort of thing. Cults will aim for that. They will aim to get that split psyche. And that's exactly what Hitler ended up with. He realised that if he took the whole soul out of a person, they were gone. But he found out that they could shatter the psyche and then attach powers to those parts of the psyche to use them like, I guess, like kind of like Windows on your computer. You can call up what you want when you want. So Hitler did that. Hitler went down, and basically his scientists that were working on that project, which was called Project Paperclip, I believe, they actually were then granted finances to go to the US and continue working on mind control. So that actually has been something that's going through. Now, there was the likes of Michael Aquilo, who's he's the high priest of the Temple of Set. He's actually high up in military. He has actually incorporated a lot of Satanism into military programming. So there's been a crossover there. So that's where we often talk about SRA as satanic ritual abuse. The victims of SRA, that they are DIDs, so dissociative identity disorders, that they are programmed multiples.
So you diagnosed with this? And who would sort of give you this information? Would you be going to a psychiatrist that would be telling you this sort of information? Or is
no. And in fact, if you're looking at getting that sort of information in Australia, pretty much forget it. Because it's been completely and utterly denied because of the schism in psychology. Effectively, DID is a disorder, a dissociative identity disorder, which you cannot actually medicate. So psychologists aren't big on diagnosing DID. They can diagnose up to 15 different personality disorders and medicate them before they'll even look at DID, which to me is absolutely incredible. The difference between the SRA, so the satanic ritual abuse, and the program multiple, and MK Ultra, which MK Ultra stands for mind control ultra. The K is because it's German. So that is a military style of mind control, and they do incorporate a lot of satanic ritual abuse in that. But the idea to build a super soldier is coming through MK Ultra, not necessarily satanic ritual abuse.
So are we relating this back to Hitler again, and that sort of...
Hitler certainly came out with the MK Ultra. It all stemmed from there. Project Bluebird, Project Paperclip, a lot of different projects that were funded by governmental departments, and they actually worked very, very hard on building what they were calling a super soldier. Hitler's idea was to have what he was calling a Superman,
Yeah.
which was basically the Aryan soldier, so a blonde-haired, blue-eyed, genetically enhanced.
So again, when we look back at these movies,
Yes.
And you've got these scientists, and they're trying to create this, and they're trying to create that.
Yep.
It all makes sense where it's originated from. So it's sort of... I don't get, though, why we don't sort of go back to that through our history or through our teachings, whether it's something they just want to sort of shove under the rug.
Oh, they absolutely do, because it's so rife. It's so much of it. It's pardon me for saying so. It's kind of like going with this with all these vaccinations. If there's all money making, so there's no way they're going to admit, oh look, we've made a mistake, because if they start to admit they've made a mistake, it basically means suing, and they don't want that. So the stuff like MK Ultra, those sorts of things would have been funded projects right along the way for a very long time.
From the German government, or
from the US government,
United
right
Nations?
across the globe. Yeah. Right across the globe. It's not. There's nowhere that hasn't been hit with MK. And I can say that for a fact because I was actually accepted into a MK Ultra program in the Navy here in West Australia. So, yes, it is. It's a black ops program. The focus isn't so much loyalty to Satan or Lucifer. The loyalty is to government in MK Ultra, because they want to be guarded. So this is all happening in the world now is nothing new. It's actually been planned for a very long time.
So if we go on to one more last sort of cult, or someone who's influenced by the cult, and we were having a discussion about the Bernies here in Australia. Can you give us an idea about where that sort of idea, where the Bernies were influenced by occultism?
Yep. So I don't know if anyone's ever checked the Bernie history. Basically, the Bernies knew each other from the time they were kids. They were both pretty, neglected and orphaned and handed around foster care and all that sort of thing. They were in a cult together, which was down Donnybrook, Collie, that sort of area. Now, I do believe, because there was speculation as to whether or not Bernie himself was the one who picked up Sarah Mott, a young girl who was never actually found. It's a cold case in Perth. She was picked up from a netball game and never ever was seen again. There was talk from, so this is going back about 30, 40 years, there was talk from cults in that area, which we went down and investigated, saying that the cults in the area had been doing human sacrifices to open up a seat of power in those areas. So they've got a triangle of power down that way. Bernie it was speculated that he was the one who picked up Sarah Mott.
Right.
He was the one who actually picked her up and took her out for murder. He didn't get done for the murder of that because basically they never found her. However, from there on, this happens quite a lot when you're watching cults. Someone like Bernie actually got a taste for it. He couldn't keep his hidden life, so to speak, separate from his everyday life. And he and his girlfriend, when they hooked back up after some time in prison, they got back together. She had married and she'd moved on, but as soon as he came out of prison, they got back together and started doing the serial killing of women through Perth. They got caught with that, and that's what ended up putting them in jail. But yeah, he was certainly involved, and I have heard that from one of the higher up witches down that way, that the Bernies were involved in that human sacrifice. They were very young then, though. So they weren't quite at their peak of murdering themselves, but they got a taste for it and they started serial killing together. At that point, the cult will usually throw them under the bus because they've taken their nightlife into their day life, so to speak. So yes, but they won't find the likes of the bodies, because when you're looking at Satanism, they do use every single part of the body.
Now let's have a look at how many did they actually murder.
As a couple with the girls, I think it was somewhere along the lines of 4 or 5. No?
I think there were quite a few, but I don't believe we actually found quite a few of them, right?
That's right. Yeah. And that was the other thing. The way that they were actually ditching the bodies was very indicative of cult. Certain things that they were doing were textbook cult moves, like such as burying them upside down, taking off their hands and all those sorts of things. There was rituals called hands of glory and all that sort of thing that they do, which is ritualistic ways of burying them, so it's known that it was a cult killing.
Well, they said that there's 5, but there possibly was more. I'm sure there were more than what they were doing.
Yeah. I'm also fairly certain that the Claremont killer, the one that never really got caught, that is actually a cult. They were looking for one guy, but they're not going to find one guy. And because they as soon as they start looking at a suspect and they're looking at it as a singular person, they've got a problem, because if you're looking at a cult, they'll switch and change between who does what, give each other alibis, do all that sort of stuff. So
I guess really the main topic and thoughts to take out of this is that cults are based on people, and I don't want to say weak-minded, but those people who are easily influenced, who come from a background that possibly needed them to have a connection to something, because they've either been adopted or there's been abuse or various other things where people just need that sense of belonging. So they're easy prey for these type of people to be influenced by.
Yeah. You say weaker people. It's most people who have been satanically ritually abused, they don't necessarily know it until they get much older. To be honest, the statistics are that usually when they turn around about 40, they start breaking what we call breaking memory, starting to remember things, having PTSD type effect. A lot of the ones who were born and raised in the cult, those issues aren't there. The rejection and all those sorts of things. You're actually trained from the time you're born or even conceived that you were created to be what they call a chosen one. So therefore you're a chosen one, you're special, you're above and beyond. The way the cult treats you, it's extreme love-hate situation. So the same one who ruthlessly abuses you is also the same one who brings all the comfort. So you've got a real split in the psyche there, because your mind can't comprehend that. So therefore it splits. The mind can't marry the two things, so it has to split. Then there's a part of them that loves and a part of them that hates. Then they just start growing on that. So yes, it's weak-minded people. When they're recruiting, they'll go into the ones not so much weak but very, very hurt and angry, because they can use those emotions, because again, it's all part of the psyche. So they can use the emotions of hate, fear, rejection, those sorts of things, which are strong emotions, and actually bend them to become murderers or commit suicide, whatever they need them to do.
So, I mean, in the earlier days, we had quite a few cults popping up left, right and centre, and they seem to be quite a common thread to everything.
Yeah.
Now these days, we don't seem to hear about them so much.
We don't, and there's a reason why we don't, particularly here in Australia. And I can tell you, as a person who does cult investigation, why that is. So what you're saying, it became quite rife for a while there. That's what they called a period of time in the 80s. It was called the Satanic Panic. There was a group of children in a daycare centre, and then they, speaking of satanic ritual abuse, coming out with memories of that sort of stuff. It started going through the court system. Other kids in other towns or other states started coming out with similar stories. It basically went global, and they were realising that there was satanic ritual abuse going on, and it was extremely rife. It created a satanic panic where people were going out and doing basically witch hunts. So it became law that in in policing, it became law, especially here in Australia, that if the police officers